It is always great to connect with Mike Ferrin, MLB Network Radio. Of course, the World Series getting underway in just about 48 hours or so. And here in San Diego, the search is on for another manager of the Padres under A.J. Preller. Mike, we appreciate you hopping on. Let's just talk about Albert Pujols because there's a lot of discussion and intrigue with the name. I guess just on its face, do you think he would be, a good manager and be a good fit specifically with the Padres?
Yeah, so this is, I think, a really fascinating question because the number of former Hall of Famers who've gone on to be big league managers that are successful big league managers is pretty short. In fact, I think you can make a case that, like there were a couple of good years maybe of Yogi Berra and Paul Molitor, and I think I'm missing one in there. Gil Hodges led the Mets to the World Series in 1969, but he was put in the Hall of Fame posthumously. It just doesn't happen all that often. So I've been asking that same question, and I actually asked it of Molitor this morning, and he kind of gave a good answer on, just understanding what players can do and trying to learn that on your own, as opposed to doing what San Diego's greatest native son outside of Tony Gwynn, Ted Williams, did, which was get frustrated with the way the guys couldn't hit like him because he was Ted Williams. So I think that's one part. And I think the other is that Albert seems to have a really good way of relating to people. He's very chill. He commands a room. He's a presence. He's very smart. And so he seems to have some of the soft science things that you would want in terms of having a manager there who maybe wouldn't just get frustrated with players who aren't be able to perform at the level that he did over the course of his career. And so I think that makes him a pretty intriguing candidate when you start to dig in and know that stuff. That said, I think it's a real long shot that he ends up as the manager of the Padres. I'm not sure that he is the first choice in that group. And really outside of the Angels, it sounds like the interest the Orioles had was a little bit overblown. So this is probably his only chance at it. Maybe he gets it in the end. I mean, he could wow them, and he certainly would carry a presence. But I think there are a number of other candidates in that mix that probably would be ahead of him, at least going into the interview in the pecking order. I know he interviewed today.
So of the other candidates, potentially, who do you envision could be a good fit here in San Diego? And if there's a name out there that you haven't heard potentially that you think could also be a good fit here at the Padres?
Yeah, Ryan Flaherty, I think, is the name that's come up a lot. He was obviously the bench coach for the Padres before he went to the Cubs. And, he was a teammate of Manny Machado's in Baltimore. And I think he's a name that is going to be linked to a lot of managerial openings. If not, San Diego, then I think Baltimore's a place that he has a good chance. His name has come up an awful lot. I think the other name that we've heard is probably Ruben Niebla, who we know has done a terrific job as a pitching coach there. I have a lot of respect for Ruben. I love Ruben. My dealings with him, I just think he's a terrific coach and a great dude. And I think he's got the right kind of personality to be able to handle that job. In terms of names that we haven't heard, I'll tell you the name of the guy that has not come up a lot publicly, and maybe it's because his organization does a job of keeping things quiet, and maybe he does too, because I don't think he's the most well-known, is Craig Albernaz, who's the bench coach of Cleveland. And you may be going, who the hell is Craig Albernaz? And I get it. I think that's probably fair. But Albernaz, before he was Stephen Vogt's bench coach the last 2 years in Cleveland, was on staff with the San Francisco Giants at the major league level. Before that, he was a minor league manager and a coach in the Rays organization. And I can tell you that just about everywhere, well, not just about, everywhere he's gone, people say that's a future big league manager. He is Stephen Vogt's closest friend. He is really good at relating to people. He is extremely baseball smart. So that's a name that I would consider in there too, that I just haven't heard his name linked with any of the openings. And quite frankly, I find that surprising because that's a guy who my understanding is could have had the Marlins job last year if he'd wanted it.
It's interesting because the names that you said there would all be first-time managers. So
yes.
What's your thoughts on a first-time manager for a team like the Padres that they're looking to win right now compared to a team that's rebuilding?
Yeah, I think with a couple of those guys, specifically with Flaherty And with Niebla, they know the dynamics of that clubhouse. And, I know Flaherty hasn't been there in a couple of years, but he's got a pretty good feel for at least the core group of players, right? So I think that makes it a little different because you've already got a lot of ground covered in what a new manager has to do in learning the personnel. So I think it would be less of an issue there. And in fact, it might be easier for them than it would be for a more experienced manager. And I don't think that they're guys that don't have experience, at least coaching. Like it's tough. Like I would love to see more minor league managers get opportunities. Morgan Ensberg, who's another San Diego guy, has been a AAA manager for the Rays for the last, 3 years now, and was in AA before that and was in A-ball. He's managed at every level. He's got 1,200 games. And I don't think that there's anything that happens inside a game that would surprise him as a manager. And I just don't think that he's gotten that opportunity to really interview for those jobs yet. So, yeah, I think that there is something to be said for having experience in the managerial chair, whether it's in the minor leagues or in the big leagues. But really, 90% of that job, or 95%, we focus on the decision making, right? Who's the reliever you pull? Who's the pinch hitter? Where do you play your defense? That kind of stuff. And we make a big deal out of that. But in the end, it comes down to player execution. And 90 to 95% of the job is how you manage people, just like anything else. If you don't want to work for a micromanager, but you want to work for somebody that has your back, has your best interest in mind, is able to have tough conversations with you in a positive manner. I think that's what really matters.
Mike Ferrin, MLB Network Radio, with us right now on Jon and Jim. It's interesting because you talked about, again, players that have had the success of Albert Pujols as a player. There's not a lot of examples of that type of caliber of a player becoming manager. Then again, there's not a lot of players that have had the success of Albert Pujols. What about pitching coaches that later become managers? I'm thinking about Buddy Black, John Farrell. There's not dozens and dozens of pitching coaches that have become managers. What's the track record suggest, or what are the challenges of moving over, 24 inches, so to speak, and going from pitching coach to manager?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the X's and O's part, right? That's what people, especially managing offensive decisions, right? That's where the difference is. I don't really think it's that hard to manage that at this point. I think you understand what the game calls for in most given situations. You view it from the pitching side. How that's going to play out. Not to mention, I just think there is better information available for every manager than there was, say 50 years ago. Now I know it wasn't a pitching coach, but Sparky Anderson earned the nickname Captain Hook because he was into his bullpen early with starters, right? Sparky Anderson understood the third time through the order penalty. He just didn't have the stats to back it up, right? And so I think once you have more information, I don't want to say it makes the job easier, but it certainly points you in the right direction of the decisions. So to me, it's keeping the group together, making sure that everybody's pulling on the same end of the rope, and building relationships. And the good news is, if you're a pitching coach like Ruben Niebla, you already have relationships with all the pitchers and the catchers, right? And so, and listen, he's been there long enough that I guarantee he's got a relationship with Manny Machado. He's got one with Fernando Tatis Jr. He has one with Xander Bogaerts. He has one with Jake Cronenworth, right? He's got the core guys that he knows, and you just take another step forward in that. And I don't think he would change much in terms of personality.
What do you make of what the Giants did today with Tony Vitello?
It is the single most fascinating decision I have, and I mean decision, that I have seen a club make in 25 years of covering Major League Baseball.
Wow.
I am absolutely fascinated. My other job is covering college baseball. And so I have covered a lot of Tony V. And Tony Vitello is an extremely energetic coach with a great background. He's been an assistant to some of the top college coaches in the country. He is the son of a really, really prominent high school baseball and soccer coach in St. Louis. Coaching and baseball is in his blood. But this is unprecedented. We have never seen a coach who had no professional experience, not just as a coach's manager, but as a player either, that has gone from the college ranks directly to the big leagues. Even the ones we have seen who have had experience. Pat Murphy obviously managed in the Padres system for close to 10 years before he was the interim manager there, and then was a bench coach again under Craig Counsell before he got the manager job. When Dick Hauser got the Yankees job in 1980, he had spent a year at Florida State. He spent the 8 previous seasons as the third base coach for the Yankees, and he played 8 years in the big leagues. Bobby Winkles went from ASU to the Angels in 1972 as a coach, and then took over as their manager in 73. Even Branch Rickey, when he left University of Michigan in 1913 to take over the Cardinals, had played 8 years in the big leagues, right? So, this is just not something that we have seen before. I have so many questions that I don't think are going to be answered until we see it go. But he is very charismatic. He's very smart. I hope that it works, but this is the kind of big swing that it really helps if you own a portion of the team and you're running baseball operations to be able to take this kind of swing. Because I think Buster Posey is going to be okay if he doesn't get it right. Yeah. But you're putting a lot into, I would say it's risky, right? It is a risky decision, but I am really interested to see how this plays out in so many ways.
Mike, before you go, is there a world in which, and you've told us before that the variance in baseball, right? It's not the NFL where the best team beats the worst team, or the NBA in a 7-game series, but do you see a scenario where Toronto is able to do this, or how much of a long shot is it for Toronto?
The odds on it sound like they're similar to what it was in 2019,
right,
when the Astros were prohibitive favorites and then lost in 7 games to the Nationals. So, I think there's a path. Absolutely. I think that there are similarities between what the Blue Jays do well and what the Brewers did well. And I know that the Brewers offense wasn't very good against the Dodgers. They control the strike zone very well. The thing that Toronto does better is they do it by hitting for power. And they're not that dissimilar from the Astros teams of 2017, 2018, 2019. Now, they're not banging out a trash can to get the signs, as far as we know. But they do make good swing decisions. They put the ball in play, and they put the ball in play hard. And so I think they're going to be a tougher test for the Dodgers pitching staff. The Dodgers bullpen is still the Dodgers bullpen. And while they don't necessarily have absolute monsters on the mound, they do have a pretty good rotation and a bullpen that I think has been better than what people realize. I believe it's been since September 1st that they haven't lost a game in which they've had a lead, or at least hadn't until Game 5 of the ALCS. So that Christian pitching pretty well overall. So, I think there's a chance. I think the series definitely makes its way back to Toronto for a Game 6 and potentially a Game 7. I think the Dodgers are still the favorites, but I absolutely can see a path where Toronto doesn't just make it interesting, but ends up winning the World Series.
Final one, Mike. That was the greatest game you've ever seen from Ohtani, right? The best game you've ever seen any player?
I mean, how many high school guys have 10 strikeout, 3 homer games?
Not a lot.
I don't think that this. I was working with Lance Lynn this week, and I was like, "You never had a high school game like that." He said, "Hey, I punched out 10 and over twice." 3 homers, that's what he did was insane. And then factor in the fact that they won the pennant on top of it, right? It's just, I mean, we may never see another performance like that again. The only thing I can think that comes close to that performance that he put up was when he, hit 50 and stole his 50th base in the same game and did 3 homers and knocked in 10 against Miami last year. That guy's, he's different, and man, are we fortunate to get to see him.
Yeah, not as fortunate in San Diego, but the point's a valid one. Mike, we appreciate you hopping on. Enjoy the World Series. Thanks for taking time for us.
You too. We'll talk soon.
Mike Ferrin, MLB Network Radio. We'll react to that. Plus some names to keep an eye on this offseason involving the San Diego Padres. Here until 6 p.m. Don't go anywhere. Jon and Jim, San Diego Sports 760, live on the iHeartRadio app.